Ladies and gentlemen, Hebrews and Shebrews, welcome to the Life Podcast, where we inspire you to thrive as peculiar people in a modern world. And today we're doing that by talking to Isac Rodriguez. He is the son of a Baptist pastor. His brothers were both Baptist pastors. He was a Baptist pastor. And then he flipped to Torah, so did his two brothers. And that is the story. And he also flipped his church, so did his other brother. And we're going to get into how that happened, why it happened, and what the reaction was like from his congregation. Before we get into this episode, here's a quick note from the people that make it possible, Shepherd's Crook Coffee. Now, if you have not tried this coffee yet, you're missing out. Some people can't drink coffee anymore because it bothers them gastrointestinally. But Shepherd's Crook Coffee roasts on an air roaster, not the drum, like many people. And the air roasting process results in a lower acidic coffee. And a lot of people who weren't able to drink coffee before are now able to drink coffee again with Shepherd's Crook Coffee. They have some gorgeous roasts. My particular favorite is the Peru. It's the darkest roast they have. Shepherd's Crook Coffee is a Torah-Observant coffee roasting small business. Owners Greg and Laura make sure that the growers are following organic processes, whether they're too small to have the certification or not. Getting you the healthy beans that you want at $11.99 a bag. Plus, with the 25% off that you get with code THELIFE, it's $8.99 a bag. Look at the crema on this coffee. It's gorgeous. If you go to shepherdscrookcoffee.com, you'll get 25% off your first order with code THELIFE. So without further ado, I give you Isac. Isac, thank you so much for being on the Life Podcast. I'm glad to have you.
It's exciting to be here, Luke. I'm glad you having me here, and I'm excited about what we're going to talk about, and hopefully just to share a testimony that could be a help to somebody out there that's looking for some help. And I hope this can do that.
I hope so too. I don't know if I told you this already. I can't remember if I emailed you this, but at least one person, maybe more, has reached out and said, I love Isac's church and you got to interview him. So I can't remember if I told you that or not, but yes, you don't come just with no references.
Well, there you go. At least somebody likes me.
Yeah, man.
I'm excited to be here, so thank you, Luke. Appreciate it.
It's a pleasure. It's all mine, Isac. So, all right, let's get right into your story, I guess. Can you tell us a little about yourself and who you are, how you were raised, and then how you eventually came into the Torah?
Sure, definitely. So I was raised in church all my life. We went to a independent Baptist church. We were in Indiana for a while. I studied Bible college, Central Florida. We I ended up graduating from Providence Baptist College. So all my life it's been Baptist, independent Baptist. I went to Baptist schools. I never went to a public school. I have one of those type of testimonies. I never went to a party. I didn't know any girl besides my wife. One of those, like they say in Hebrew, Baruch Hashem, type of testimony. So I don't complain about it. So I was raised in church all my life. Up to the age of 18, went to college, Bible college, to be a preacher, and then started a church back in 2007, January 2007, and been here since. So we started as a Baptist church, and we came to Torah probably about 7.5, 8 years ago.
Wow. That's like everyone's dream, really, I think, that their church will come to Torah.
It's been an amazing journey, I cannot complain. It's been exciting just to see the people understand this the way.
Can we look a little closer at your upbringing then? Because so many times you hear about people who are raised in church and then they don't stay on the narrow path. Whatever happened in your upbringing, it worked. And so have you thought about that before and thought about maybe what your parents got right?
So besides the belt,
hey, isn't that in there, bro?
Works, man. It works. I think the biggest thing is, and I always, even though maybe at this point the Baptists won't necessarily talk to me, I do thank Hashem. I thank God for them because even in the upbringing, I went to chapel, 3 times a week in the Christian school. They preach the fear of God in your heart. You're afraid to do this, that, and this. So I always say, I think some of that had to do with just keep me on the right path. Keeping me clean, my brothers. So I thank my parents for their sacrifice, their time, to allow me to go to these private schools. So I think, I have no complaints. I don't agree obviously with everything that they teach, but I thank God for them and them being there throughout my upbringing. And I think the biggest thing is my parents always tried to be, and I'm not just making this up, but they always try to be what they are at home, what they were at the church. I can never say that I felt my parents were hypocrites or they didn't believe what they believed. Having mom and dad at home obviously always helps. They were on the same page, so I couldn't go to one to get permission since the other one said I could not do something or could do something. So they were very, very united. To this day, they are. And so I think that obviously helped a lot.
That's wonderful, man. I hope. And I don't want to distract from your story, but when you are raised this way, and you're grounded in truth to pretty much to an extent, and you haven't strayed. That's a huge, awesome plus in your life, and also it's as if not only can you handle more, but more is expected of you. I guess.
Huge, yes. And I always talk to my kids. My son, he's gonna be 21 this month, and then my daughter's 18. And I always say, look, any decision you make will either strengthen you as a father or mother in the future or weaken you. I said, because you have the opportunity to grow up in a Torah believing home, Bible believing home, so you're going to be required. So any decision you make, just be very careful, whatever you decide to do. I said, your dad, although I was not perfect, and I always say, I feel my kids are way better than what I was. Me, I was a basketball junkie, man. I played basketball in the snow, summer. I mean, that was my life, basketball. But I always tell them, whatever you do, it's going to affect you how you're going to be able to parent. And the cleaner you keep yourself, the better you can be that example for your kids and say, look, I know life is tough, difficult, temptations all over, but if Adonai has you here, it's for a purpose. And he's allowed you to live at this time, in this time. And he can give you victory. And as long as you live victory now, you'll be able to portray victory to your kids in the future. So I'm always constantly talking to them, and Bezrat Hashem, thank the Lord. To this point, they're good kids. At least till today. We'll see what happens tomorrow.
Yeah, I know. But okay, so you had this quote unquote normal Baptist upbringing, and then you started a church. When did the Torah ideas interrupt your life, if you want to get there next?
So we're a Spanish church. It was called in Spanish Iglesia Bautista Bíblica del Faro. So it was but we cut it down now. We're Congregational of Faro now. But we started in 2007. And when we started the church, it was just me and my wife. We moved down from the Chicagoland area to Houston area, just started knocking doors, inviting people to church. And a gentleman here in La Porte lent us a building. So we started in a small room and we continued to grow, just inviting people, typical Baptist church, teaching Baptist doctrines and what we believed at that point was the complete truth. It was around 2014 when a gentleman came to our church, and he was a missionary to Israel. And he laid on our hearts the desire to outreach the Jewish people. I remember that day clearly. It was one of those deals where it just hit me, and I stood up, and after the service, and as you typically do in a Baptist church, preacher preaches, and you give like a few words at the end. And I just told the church, I said, look, forgive me, but we have forgotten about the Jewish people. We read about them, we talk about them, we preach about them, and but we don't outreach them. We don't try to give them the gospel of the Messiah, right? Yeshua. And so from there, I started having just a heart to search, Israel things, Torah scrolls, shofars. At that point, I didn't know what a shofar was called, but just Jewish things, right? So I take my first trip to Israel in 2014. Now, mind you, I've been there 11 times since. But our first time was 2014, and I remember going to the Wailing Wall uh, there, and I ended up staying there for a long time, just praying and asking the Eternal to give me the heart, the desire to reach His people, but wisely, because it's a whole different ball game. Well, talking to a Jewish person, and talking to anybody else. So ever since then, when we came back, I couldn't get rid of that calling, that desire to work with Jewish folks. And so I started looking some up and just trying to befriend them. And you don't know how that works because, you go to a kosher restaurant asking for pepperoni pizza. It just doesn't work that way. Or you go to a kosher restaurant, hey, can I get some cheese on this burger, please? So you go through these things and it's like you have no idea, but you're supposed to do it. You want to work with them. So I finally met a Jewish believer in Messiah, in Yeshua, and his name was Daniel, and he lived probably about 35 minutes from our home. Um, and he looked at me and he said, "Oh, well, by the way, I gotta tell you this. This is probably blow your mind." So I can't say names. I got to be very careful. But I met a Jewish man that he reaches out to his Jewish folks using pamphlets, videos. I mean, that's what he does. And so I called him or emailed him so he could send me some information. He sent me a bunch of information so I could study up and just know a little more. I went out to meet him and we had a conversation. Long story short, he calls me at the hotel and he says, "Hey, Isaac, what do you think if I were to buy you a house?" And I'm like, whoa, wait, 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 what? I says, "Yeah, what if I buy a house so you can live in Houston?" And I'm thinking, how do you respond to this? Am I understanding this correctly? He goes, "Yeah, yeah, go look at 10 houses anywhere in Houston and just send them to me." I said, "Okay." So long story short, I'm looking for the cheapest houses. He goes, "No, no, no. I want you to live in the Jewish area." He goes, "I see your heart, and I want you to be able to have the ability to have friends, Jewish friends." I said, "Okay." So I drive out to the Jewish area and start looking for houses. I'm looking for the cheapest houses, and he ends up buying not the most expensive, the second most expensive home, and he just paid cash for it. He sent the money, paid cash. House right now is probably worth close to $600,000. So he paid a good amount of money. So we've been there for 8 years. And my wife is a piano teacher. So she's been teaching little Jewish Orthodox kids for these 8 years. They come over and she teaches them. I have good friends here, meet with them. A rabbi, he's actually a rabbi, does conversion. He actually wants to stay at our house when he comes because he travels. So he'll stay at our house and we'll have conversations. He knows I'm a believer, but we have really good conversations. But in that house is where I met Daniel, going back to Daniel. And he was the first Jewish believer, Israeli, spoke more Hebrew than English, that asked me, so, because he started going to Baptist church, he goes, "Why don't you guys follow the law?" My wife is in the kitchen. I'm sitting there at the table and I'm thinking, I almost know what he's going to do. Because if I say, well, we do follow the law. But I just stood quiet. I said, "You know what, Daniel, that's a very good question. A very good question." But from there, I told him, "Let me get back with you." And that's where I started doing some research. 119 Ministries was huge, and helped me understand a lot of things. And I love their spirit. So that's where it all started, right there. When he asked me, "Why don't you all follow the law?" So, up to this point, we're not keeping Sabbath. We're not. We kept kosher in the home because we knew we lived in a Jewish neighborhood. So out of respect, but not out of conviction. I give you an idea. We had an Orthodox lady before she walked into our house. She asked my wife, "Is your husband circumcised?" And she's like, "Yeah." And she's okay. And she would not come in. And she was actually, when we finally met, when I was there, one of the times that she came, she said, "Oh, you all believe in that Jesus guy, right? That Jesus guy." And right, I mean, this is you. I'm sitting there. Oh, that hurts me. But at the same time, I want to be a light. I want to try to reach them. Long story short, 6 years later, she's a believer in Yeshua. Her sister's a believer in Yeshua in Israel, and her nephew also is a believer in Yeshua in Israel. So
Whoa.
it takes time, but I know, the Almighty had a purpose in everything.
Wow, so the house was a good investment in the end.
I guess it was. I guess it was. Yes, and and we're happy there. Our kids are growing up there. We always know, hey, today he can call us and say get out, but meanwhile, we've been there taking care of the house, respecting the house, fixing it up. But it was really a miracle. So it's just things that have fallen in place. I can tell you story after story that it just sort of solidified my calling to be a light to the Jewish people. I always tell them, I'm not trying to force to convert you. I'm not. That's not my job. The Ruach Hakodesh, is the one that will do that. I just try to be the light, answer your questions, let you know that the Yeshua is not the Jesus that you may think he is. Sometimes you just have to leave little nuggets, let them think, a little bit.
As you were doing this search, trying to figure out the answer to Daniel's question, was there one thing that you discovered, if you remember? Was there a tipping point at one point? Was there kind of a moment where you thought, is it possible that we don't have this right?
There was, Luke. In fact, for the most part, the law wasn't even an issue in the Christian world. It's like you don't even really study it. You just, no, we don't follow the law, and that's it. So as I'm watching videos and looking for answers, not to change, just looking for answers for Daniel, I didn't have no question. I wasn't in doubt. I was fine, right? And as you listen to 119 Ministry, believe it or not, I would actually listen to it for the first few weeks, and then I would take like we call it a siesta, right? A rest. And so I would start listening to it, and then I fall asleep with the AirPods in. And then as soon as their music comes in at the end, it would wake me up, and okay, it's time to get back to work. So but that would stay in my mind. Then I watched the Pauline Paradox. Once I watched Pauline Paradox, it just opened my mind to so many things. Yet I was not. It was still not in my mind that okay, I'm gonna have to eat kosher one day. I wasn't even thinking about that or Sabbath. I was like, oh wow, we got Paul wrong. Okay, we're not understanding Paul, but I didn't know where this was taking me and how far it was going to take us. So, I'm just excited. I'm okay. This is good. I'm marking up my Bible. This is good. Oh yeah, you're right. We misunderstood him, but not realizing that I'm digging my own grave at the end of the day, right? So I'm teaching at the church, and the people are like, oh, this is really good. And I realized, wait a minute. So if we are Israel, if we have to do this, then we're supposed to be keeping Sabbath and we're supposed to be eating kosher. So all these start coming to mind. And then I like, okay, how do I present this to the church now? But I can't present it until my family's convinced. I will never do something like that. I will never go to the K, we call it Keilah, right? The congregation, and present something if my family is not convinced because, I've always said in my mind, in my heart, I listen to a man with all my heart if I know his family listens to him. And so I'm presenting this to my wife. She, oh, okay, that's cool. That's nice. But it was weeks after weeks after weeks. And so I slowly presented to the church, about the law, the Torah. And it took some time. I will say this, it was a miracle. We didn't lose anybody because of Torah from the congregation. At that time, we were probably running about 120 people, 125 people. Um, they were all there. Some people left during the COVID time, but I think it was just their time. It was, it had nothing to do with the tour itself. But it it took some time. But I wanted to convince my family first. My kids were smaller, so it was easier. It was my wife, and then once they were convinced, brought us to the church, and they became convinced. Now we didn't change to Saturday services right away because and I can be wrong, Luke, and this is not, I'm not saying this is the right way to do it, but I felt that these people have been with me since the beginning of time. And for me just to come and change on them, they got their jobs. They told their jobs they can't work on Sundays. It takes time. And I've seen ministries where they try to switch things so quick, you lose good people. Sometimes you got to give them time to adjust. It's not as easy as it can be for other people. So we did take some time, and now of course, we keep Shabbat on Fridays with the Keilah, and then Saturdays we close Shabbat together. Also, our Saturday services. But yeah, it all started with Jewish outreach. Their questions are not your typical Christian questions to get you thinking. Then you start researching. I got into 119 Ministries, got me thinking, and then changed my life. It changed my family's life. It changed our congregation's life. And we've been going at it since then.
Did your wife have any questions for you during that process when you were trying to present this? What was her biggest objection or pushback or question, or if she had any? Maybe she just thought, you're right.
No, she wanted to know what I was teaching. But I think as any wife is this going to be a phase of my husband? Is this going to be one of those things? And she was listening intently with the desire to learn. But then is he to come back with, oh, you know what, I was wrong. I feel that's probably what she was feeling, but at the same time supportive. I never felt that she was not supportive. She was always supportive the whole time. And now she's on fire. I mean, I got to hold her back sometimes. But yeah, no, she's excited. My kids are the same. I remember I was sitting, we were sitting at the dinner table, and my son, he was probably, I don't know, maybe 13 years old. And he goes, Dad, it was Pa, Pa for Papi. Pa, you're not the only one that believes this. Because I was talking to him, I was like, this is going to be a huge change. I don't know if you guys realize this and what path this will take us. And he goes, Dad, this is normal. A lot of people believe this way. And so every time we got rejected by one of our friends, our churches, or churches that we knew or where I spoke at, I would look at him. I said, "Oh yeah, anybody?" And I would just mess with him all the time. I said, "This is what it is." So at the end of the day, we lost, and I don't want to say we lost friends. I don't know if you lose friends, but just people that were with. We would have missionaries come to our church all the time. They would want to be a part of our church, or we were a big giving church for mission work and whatnot. Um, so yeah, you know, that's probably another story, but
Wow. Well, okay. Now I'm curious about how the church reacted at large. Did you have any pushback there either? It sounds like most people just were like, "Yep, Isaac, you're right. Let's do this thing." Or did you have some deep discussions with some people at least?
and if there's any pastor out there listening to this, they probably know exactly what I'm talking about if they go through this. The silence of the people is probably what kills most pastors because you come up with this new truth, although it's not new, and you're excited. The Bible makes sense. You connected the dots. You can sit down with somebody for 4 or 5 hours and talk scripture and just start connecting dots. You see their eyes opening up. You're expecting that the people are going to be excited about it as you're teaching through it, and it's just flowing, no longer writing notes. It's just flowing now because scripture makes sense. After service, people are quiet. They're nice to you. They're kind as normal. You don't hear, "Hey, man, that was good," because they're taking it in. This is something completely new. So this went on for, I would say, years, 2 or 3 years, and nobody was mad. Nobody would say, "Hey, stop teaching that," but nor was anybody saying, "Man, thanks." So you're sitting in a gray area, and where you're at a point, okay, are these guys about to kick me out here, or are they actually going to embrace me even more? You're literally just sitting in that gray area. And I always tell them, say, "Hey, I was here first," so. But messing with them. But at the end of the day, I think the silence is what sort of ate me because it was neither, "Hey, great job," nor, "Hey, where are you going with this?" It was just, let's listen. Then you'll hear people talking to other pastors because you grow up in a Baptist world, so you know a lot of Baptist preachers, missionaries, and they have contact with them. "Hey, our pastor's talking about this. Oh, you better get out of there. You need to get out of that place. I'm telling you, get out of that church." And so you'll have that, which nobody ever did. Nobody ever did. I think they were wise to sit it out, listen, and study it out and come to your own conclusion. And that's what I would always say is, look, if I'm wrong, I have no issue being wrong. I do not get paid to be wrong by no means. I'm not making friends being wrong here, people. I said, so feel free to come talk to me, come to my office. If I'm misinterpreting something, if I'm explaining something wrong, hey, let me know. I have no issue. I have no issue. I'm not trying to be wrong here. So I would constantly say that. But I think the biggest thing was silence. It wasn't pushback. At least within our congregation.
Yeah, I could see how that could be disconcerting. You're probably always wondering, what are these people thinking?
It really is. I mean, something just thinking, okay, am I just doing this in vain? Are they eventually going to just let me go? Which is fine. I had no issue, um, but I said if they let me go, at least I want to do my best to put out the truth.
After a while, then it just everyone seemed to be on board. Everyone who at least was stayed there.
Yeah, yeah, no, yes, everybody's on board. Everybody. I'm not going to say everybody lives everything correctly, but they're all 100% on board and they
Wow.
believe it. If we're going to celebrate Pesach, they're going to be there. If we're going to celebrate Yom Teruah, if we're going to celebrate any feast, they're going to be there. They're there. Our Sabbath services, they support. We have a big uh, congregational dinner every Friday for Shabbat, break bread together. They're there supporting, they're helping. Many changed their work instead of working out Saturdays. Of course, they take it off for Shabbat. Now they're working on Sundays. Many made different decisions. We have a lot of little kids that are growing up, which is awesome. We have tons of little kids right now. We have probably about 50 little kids. We have about 40 teenagers. So that's always good for the future of a congregation.
Do you have any recommendations for a pastor in your shoes before you started presenting this stuff to people? Do you have anything looking back? Was there anything that seemed like it resonated with people more than others? Or I don't know.
In regards to teaching Torah,
Presenting this idea without freaking everybody out.
yes, that's two things. One is go slow. Even though you may be on mile, 20 and they're just starting, just stop, slow down, just go slow because this is very difficult for people to comprehend because their life is not just in the church. Their life is their family members, their other church members of the same denominations. I mean, this goes deep. So sometimes you just have to go slow and answer their questions. So what I ended up doing was I took all the letters of the Apostle Paul and we went through every verse, every chapter, and I would ask them, did Paul say this or did we misunderstand this? The interpretation, Acts 10, the interpretation of the dream. I said, should we give the interpretation or should we just leave Peter give his own interpretation? And so I just paused. What do you guys think? And let them answer. So I didn't give them the answers. I allowed them to answer so they can see it on their own. So we went through all the letters of Paul because obviously he's the one that most people go to when it comes to speaking against having to follow Torah. So that's what I ended up doing, but very slow. We took, I mean, what we call back then Sunday school, right? Every Sunday school, we were teaching this, going through the letters, going through the letters. I was already ready to go to keep Sabbath, eat kosher, but I knew that there's good people that can be helped if my ambition is tamed, to make sure that they all can get on board with us.
That seems wise. It's hard to do when you're so excited about something, but
It is. I think people try to look at scriptures, and you got to understand in scriptures, they were all Jewish folks. This was normal to them. This type of living, you're changing culture, you're changing so many things for good people that, they've loved you, they've been there since the beginning with you, and you would hate to lose them just because you went too quick. So I think just taking your time. One of the things that worked for me was going through the letters of Paul and letting them answer. So anywhere there's a possible contradiction or difficult, passage to understand, read it with them, let them answer. And I would say this. So if Paul did say this, we no longer have to do this. Then did Paul break Torah, the law of God? Because remember, he didn't have a New Testament. He literally had scriptures, what we know as the Tanakh. And there says you can't add or take away. And I would always ask him this: what is the difference between uh, uh, Joseph Smith and Paul? They both had a dream. They both had somebody speaking, some divine being speaking to them. They both wrote books or letters. What's the difference? Because why are the Mormons wrong and we're right? I mean, we got two guys that did the same thing essentially. I said, because if you read the Book of Mormons, it literally talks completely against the Torah of God. I said, this one, Paul, doesn't. That's why we know that his writings are 100%, unless you misunderstand him, of course. But that's just, we'd go over those type of passages.
I think that's a smart way to do it.
So that helped us.
And then maybe we should talk now. It's very cool story, by the way. I mean, this is the dream story of many people in churches who have discovered this stuff for themselves, and they're like, if only I could bring everyone with me. I mean,
Yes, of course.
maybe
Yeah.
we could talk about your brothers too. Do you want to talk about them now?
Yeah. So through this journey, which is amazing, I didn't, okay. So I started looking up, I didn't know both my mom and dad are Jewish descent. Um, Long story short, I'm working on my Sephardic Jewish Spanish citizenship in Spain. Remember, I was telling you earlier that I would love to one day retire in Spain. So I already submitted our papers, our everything they need. We're just waiting for them to get the approval. So I would do all this research and I would talk to my brothers. Hey guys, do you guys know we're of Jewish descent? I had no idea. So there's one guy that we were connected through our DNA, and he is of Jewish descent also. But he actually works for Ancestry. He's a professional genealogist for Ancestry.com. And so he's my cousin. And so I reached out to him and said, hey, look, I started working on my tree. I don't know if I'm doing it right. I'm just putting things together left and right. He goes, I can take a look at it. And he charged $50 an hour. I said, sure. So he did, took a look at it. He said, hey, you got a lot, you got a lot done. You did a good job. And he goes, I had to fix some things. And he goes, do you want me to go certify everything? I said, yeah, that'd be great if you can certify, because you have to have documentation to be able to certify everything. And so he's not a religious guy by no means. He was just, doing his ancestry work. And I told him, hey, by the way, do you do this work consistently? I mean, is this what you do? He goes, yeah, this is what I do. I said, okay, well, would you be able to help me out? He goes, sure. I go, look, and I explained to him about what I was doing regarding my Sephardic Jewish uh, lineage in Spain. He goes, I told him, look, through my last name, I realized that, it's a registered Jewish name in Spain, et cetera, et cetera. I go, but, my DNA, it shows that I have Sephardic Jewish DNA. I said, but I don't have any connection. He goes, oh. So he calls me the next day. He goes, Isaac, you're not going to believe this. He goes, you connect with me on the 10th generation. So from here, I have everything done, both on your mom's side and your dad's side. I said, you're kidding me. So, Luke, just to give you an idea, we're talking about $150,000 worth of work. He said, this is how long it's. He goes, I've been doing this for 15 years, every day, my own ancestry. He goes, I'm going to give it to you. And I go, cool. And so this is exciting. I'm going through it. I said, oh, wow. So I got 80 generations of Jewish folks. And he said, I go, oh, he goes, yeah. He goes, your dad's lineage goes back to King David. I said, you're lying. He goes, yeah, no, it does. And for him, it was like, it wasn't even important. And I was, are you kidding me? He goes, yeah, your dad's line goes to King David. My mom's line, he got to 1392. So we have a few conquistadors, like whoever, Francisco Montejo, that's the person's name. He was a conquistador that conquered like the Yucatan area, of Mexico and the Caribbean, all that stuff. My parents are from Puerto Rico, by the way. They're both from Puerto Rico. So I would call my brother. I was like, look, does this intrigue you? Just to get them at least interested in what Jewish things are. Because I had already said a few things about Torah, and I can tell it wasn't, their cup of tea at that point. So they started investigating. They started seeing what I was seeing in regards to our ancestry and all that stuff. And then they started asking more questions. My younger brother, which he's 36, I think, Elmer, he was an assistant pastor. He had pastored a church, but then he moved up north as an assistant pastor at an English church. Um, and so he would ask me some questions. He goes, okay. He goes, you answer my question, but that's it. So, not too much. I'll ask the questions, you give me the answers, but you couldn't push too much. My brother was down here in Texas with me, but he was pastoring an English church. And I said, that's fine. At that point, by that point, which is about 4 years ago, I knew that you don't throw this stuff out. People will ask for it. And my brother said, Isaac, guess what? My brother Elmer, he goes, some guy came to my Sunday school and they were asking me what I thought about Sabbath. And I said, yeah, Amr, it's going to keep happening too. I said, this is not going to stop. And so that got him to start investigating more and more. Long story short, Luke, he was so convinced he didn't want to cause problems at the church over there. He said he loved the pastor that they received him. We're not that type of people to try to cause problems. So he sells his house in 1 week. He buys the house cash in Arkansas. He gets there and he's having Shabbat with his family. He invites a couple Spanish folks, in the area to have Shabbat with them. And a year later, there's an old Methodist church, beautiful building. They turn the building and give him the building. Here, you can use this building. And so now he has a congregation there in Arkansas where they meet. It's not a large group. I think they have maybe 20, 25 people, but they meet for Shabbat. They have teachings, they sing together. So it was just amazing how the leap of faith that he took. And not only was he able to buy a house cash, he bought two buildings in the little downtown area of Buckner. I think it's Buckner, Arkansas. He started his insurance business. It's going well, Baruch Hashem. And he was given a beautiful church building. So he uses that now for his Keilah, his congregation. So that's my brother Almer, which he has an awesome story too. Um, and he's very grateful. He's always thanking me. Isaac, man, thanks for not giving up. Thank you for not giving up because I know I asked so many questions and it's been a few years. He goes, but I would never go back to where we were. My family's so happy. His kids are smaller. They're, I think, like 10, 9, 8 years old. Um, and so now he has people in his congregation that come to Torah. He's had influence in others outside of his congregation, his friends and stuff like that, that also come to Torah. So you can just see how people can reach other people and be a light to other people. So that was another miracle, and with my brother, younger brother Almer, my older brother Hector, he's the older brother. I'm the one in the middle. He was pastoring an English church here, doing very well. But then, and we would talk a lot more than me and my brother Almer. And I would talk to him, and I would talk to him. Eventually, I got to the point. I said, I'm done, Hector, because I answer your questions. And I said, and that's it. You leave me like that. I said, you know what? Once you're ready, let me know. And I would pray for him because I really wanted him to come to Torah because he has a really good heart, my brother. And he would always respect me. He would never criticize me. He even allowed me to speak at his congregation, and of course, I would respect the pulpit, obviously. But he got to a point where he felt that God wanted him to move on to start another church in Florida, but a Spanish church. So he found a pastor for the church. He resigned. He goes out to Florida, and he was out there for 8 months. But now he has time because it's an English church starting the Spanish department. So he has a salary. He's sitting at his desk. He's studying, and he remembered everything that I would tell him. And it was burning in his heart. Isaac, he calls me. More questions from Florida now. He just moved his whole family out there. They just got jobs out there. And so we had Sukkot about 2 years ago. And I saw that he was hungry and he was convinced now. When I say convinced, he would always say, I'm convinced, but 99.9%. Because he's still working for the Baptist church. He wanted to make sure that he is 100% convinced before he lets them know. But he would go to the pastor there and ask him questions because, look, my brother teaches me this and this and this. What do you think? What do you think? To the point where the pastor would get really mad. There's a point where he would hit the desk. You're making me mad, Hector. Anyways, but he goes, I'm not trying to make you mad. I really have genuine questions here. And my brother is not a young man. He pastored over 20 something years. This is not a guy who went to Bible college. He's not some little young guy coming to the pastor. He was actually older than the pastor, but he's trying to be respectful and ask the questions. So my brother was convinced to a point. Well, I said 99.9%, and he said, and I said, hey Isaac, Hector, why don't you come to Sukkot? We're to celebrate Sukkot. Just come, man. And he goes, oh, let me see. I don't have the time. I don't have the time off. I don't have the money. I said, I promise you, Hector, if you come, I said, the eternal is going to work in your life and he's going to do miracles in your life. Luke, long story short, God provided his tickets, rental car, everything, plus an extra $2,000 for him to come. And this is after he came. I mean, he came by faith after he came. So he knew at Sukkot we were singing. His wife is just crying because she already knew the beliefs and she felt the presence of God. She goes, I've never felt the presence of God as I felt at that place in Sukkot. They were enjoying it. They were loving it. The daughter, which is my niece, she was loving it. She was enjoying it. She was crying. So my brother obviously is convinced. He goes back, and the English pastor said, "I thought you were going to a camp." He goes, "I did. We were in camping." He goes, "Yeah, you went to what do you call that?" He goes, Sukkot, Feast of Tabernacles. My brother said that to him. He goes, "Yeah." He goes, "You shouldn't be doing that." And my brother like, "Do you know what Feast of Tabernacles is?" He goes, "No." Then he goes, "Why are you telling me I shouldn't be doing something you don't even know what it is?" And they fired him. They fired him at that point. They fired him, so he was without a job. And he grabbed a family and moved back to Texas. God provided a job that allows him to keep the Sabbath. He found grace with the owner and the manager and says, if you need to take the days off for your feast and what you believe, go ahead and do that. And they're Christians too, but they respected him. So he works for an HVAC company. He's not a reseller, but I forget what you call it. Anyways, but he sells HVAC and he's doing really well. But yeah, they literally just fired him at the moment. And I think a lot of people in that congregation are actually upset because why they fired you? And of course, my brother didn't want to cause division. He didn't want to cause problems. He goes, well, just differences of opinions. And so he moved back to Texas. He's here. They're now in our congregation. So we do bilingual. So he translates me, I translate him. And we've been working together for the last about a year and a half now.
That's beautiful. It's like the Rodriguez brothers are single-handedly flipping everyone, over to Torah.
Yeah, well, it's crazy because I thought my brother was never going to come to Torah. My brother Hector, especially when he left. I was like, that's it. It's over with. He's going to Florida. We shall not talk again, probably, right? Me and my brothers, we've never fought. We've never gotten upset with each other. We've never hung up a phone. We never went to sleep mad at each other. We've always been very close to each other. No matter how we believe, what we believe, we've had a really good relationship. And we still do to this day. But man, when he started asking the questions when he was out there, I was like, can this be? And yeah, he's all in. He's in now. And now you can't stop him. I mean, he's posting, he's talking, he's on Facebook answering questions. A very good spirit. My brother has a very good spirit. He's not trying to be mean, but he's going to answer the questions.
It's very exciting, man. It's very exciting. It's very hopeful, I think, for a lot of people. So remind us again, time frame of when this is happening. 2014, something like this. When you've
I come to the Jewish outreach, to say, visiting Israel, 2014. 2016-ish, 17-ish is when I started coming to Torah.
And then over the years, your brothers came too. Okay.
Yes. And my brother Albert came probably about a year and a half before my brother Hector, the older one, came to Torah.
Wow. So does that bring us up to today in your life story, or is there more?
So yeah, for the most part, we're here at the congregation. We're in Pasadena, Texas. We actually have a couple of buildings, but we sort of outgrew it. So we rent a Methodist church, and we rent out our building over there. We're it was just how I was raised, how I was built. We're pretty conservative. You could just, imagine independent Baptist. So it's sort of our background. It's who sort of we are. So I know there's a lot of people out there. Sometimes they'll have their different background. They feel comfortable in certain, some, Pentecostals may feel more comfortable in a Pentecostal type setting or charismatic or Baptist. So, but we have an orchestra. My son's over the orchestra. We have like 6 violins, trumpets. They play with us with all the songs that we sing out there. We have, of course, pianists. A lot of our teens play a lot of different instruments. Flute. What else do we have? I'm not a musician by no means. My son is the one. My daughter, my son, and my wife, they play music beautifully. They love music.
Wow. This sounds, I've never actually been to a church with an orchestra, except maybe one in Brooklyn, actually. But yeah, that's cool.
Yeah.
So, all right.
You're more than welcome to come if you want.
Hey, maybe I will sometime. Where can people find you and do you have like a church website or?
I know we have Facebook page. It's in Spanish, Congregación El Faro. So if they put Congregation El Faro, Pasadena, Texas, they'll be able to get it. I think one of our guys opened up an Instagram page, Facebook. We are on YouTube also. So same thing, Congregación El Faro. They can find us on YouTube. And so everything you watch on YouTube, they'll see everything in Spanish, our songs, our orchestra. Now, we got some Paul Wilbur songs. I mean, we just put orchestra to it. They're just very, other guys, the young kids are really good at just listening to the music and just putting music to it and piano to it. But once it gets to the teaching itself, that's English and Spanish.
Do you have recommendations to any just believer who's listening to this, any Christian, any Baptist maybe, and is it the first time they've ever heard anyone talk about this Torah stuff? Would you have any thoughts on where they might go next? What maybe they should do?
So you're talking about somebody that's starting to look into this a little bit.
Yeah, and hasn't maybe a Christian who's looking like
I always say this. First of all, not to be afraid of the word Torah. It means instruction. When you have a phone, most of us, when we get a new phone from the AT&T store, T-Mobile store, we open up the box, we grab the phone, and we're happy with being able to take pictures, send messages, phone call. And typically what we do with the instructions is we just toss them aside. We just put it on one side and that's it. We don't need the instructions anymore. And when you're looking at the phone, you have your basic needs. So, however, there are people that are making, hundreds of thousands of dollars a year off their phone. They know how to do so many things because they read the instructions. They know how much they can do with their phone, with the capacity of the phone, because they didn't throw out the instructions. So as a Baptist, as an independent Baptist, we were the type where, okay, tithe, soul winning, go knock doors, bus routes, altar call, these the 5 basic things. So what Torah is you're just grabbing the instruction and you're adding and you're taking so much more out of life. Your phone is a life. And so when you hear the word Torah or you hear the word instruction, you're just getting more instructions to the life that the Eternal is giving you. How to eat, how to rest, how to enjoy fellowship with His presence when it comes to Moedim. This is all stuff that helps the spirit and it helps the life. And I always tell them, don't be afraid, because Luke, what happens in this walk, and you probably know just as much as me or more, is sometimes people can go really astray and they forget about Yeshua. And that's something we can never, ever forget about our Messiah is Yeshua. He's the reason we're here. He's the reason that He took away the decree of death that we all deserve so we can walk in life. And sometimes you'll see people that will, I just put a post on my Instagram in Spanish about Yeshua, the Lion of the tribe of Judah. And I always say, do you want to follow the tribe or do you want to follow the lion? I said, we can never forget our focus in Yeshua. So anybody that's studying this, you'll see things that'll scare you. Keep your focus in Yeshua and don't be afraid of Torah. It's the instruction for your life. It has nothing to do with your salvation. It's how do you walk out your salvation. It's through these instructions and you'll get the most out of it, just like those that are making hundreds of thousands of dollars off their phones because they got the most out of the instructions.
I think that's a great analogy. I think hopefully that will resonate with people. That's very cool. It's like the phone can do more than you thought, or should be doing more than you thought. Do you have any words to say to the Torah world at large? Any thoughts for Torah observers out there?
I would say there's a lot of things, like, for example, in my life that I would like to do. And I think as a Torah observer, I have to make the decision, is this because I want to do it? Or if I don't do it, can I be more of a light? So there's certain things I think that a lot of people, when they leave the church, which, of course, you don't want to be part of a system that's not teaching complete truth. But sometimes people leave it and they almost have a hatred towards, the church, or they'll make fun of it. I've always tried to tell people, we don't want to do that. We want to be a light. We want people to see that we're happy. We're walking in Torah. We don't have to criticize them or talk bad about them or talk bad about what they do or what they don't do. Just live your life. And if you get to a point where you have to make a decision, for example, if our congregation were to go, let's say, full messianic, okay, I mean, with the Torah, I have no issue with that. I think it's a beautiful thing. Am I going to help people or hurt people more? If that makes sense. I have the right to do it, and it's not against Torah, but I know there's a lot of people in the Baptist world that I love, and I would love for them to come to Torah. But if I have that, I can forget about it. And not that I have an issue with it. So as a Torah follower, you have to make the decision in your life. You want to reach your family, but you're going to be one of those, and you have every right to do so. But just understand it'll come with a cost. Or you want to be a little more, okay, let's something that somebody can attain. Okay, all right, you don't eat pork. I can respect that. That's not abnormal. Oh, wow, come to the feast. Yeah, come to the feast. It's normal. But if I'm gonna walk around, how should I say it, dressed like an Orthodox Jewish guy, black and white, this and that, I'm gonna scare people away before they can even get close. But I think every Torah person should just think about the decisions you make, although you may have the right, how much will it allow you to influence others to come to this walk? That's what I would say, I think. If that makes sense. Hope that made sense.
Yes. Yes, that makes
Okay.
sense. That makes sense. Absolutely. No need to be unnecessarily different from your surroundings and the people you're trying to win over when those trappings aren't to do with the new way you're living, the Torah
Exactly.
way. Yeah.
Yeah, blowing the shofar in their face.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. When it's just the trappings, don't make it a hill to die on.
Yeah, and I wear tzitzits. I always wear them underneath, and I wear the ones I buy them in Jerusalem. With the mantle. And the reason I do that is because I can wear the other tzitzits. I have no issue with them, but when you work with Jewish folks, they're going to look at that like and that. So you have to get the kosher ones for them. So I end up getting the kosher ones, so I'm not stumbling block to them.
Well, I don't know if I have any more questions for you. Would you like to add anything else at all about your journey or anything else?
No, I know. I've enjoyed this conversation with you, and I hope again, if there's somebody out there, you have a brother, you have a sister, you know, don't lose hope. Don't lose hope. Tikva. You never know. It took 8 years. No, I'm sorry, 6 years for my brother, my older brother, and he wasn't just a brother. He was a pastor of 20 years. Bible. He was an assistant of 10 years. He's a grandfather now. So it's not just some guy. He was somebody was not yet convinced, but now after 6 years he came to Torah. My younger brother. So don't get discouraged.
Well, I may have one more question for you. You guys were all pastors, right? I mean, all three of you. Wow, man. And what was the biggest roadblock for you guys to think that this was okay to do? Was it hard to think that the entire Baptist establishment missed this? How did you process that?
So when I started listening to 119 Ministries, I started studying on my own with the correct lens. As I was studying, I'm not thinking, oh, the Baptists are wrong and this and that. I'm just thinking, I'm getting more information, I'm learning things. But it wasn't clicking on, that, yeah, but I'm digging my own grave here at the same time. So I couldn't tell you how I processed it because I was just processing it as I'm just studying and I'm learning more. But then once you realize, wait a minute, Torah is a ketubah, I'm Israel, now I'm responsible to this. That's when it started clicking in. But at the same time, it was exciting. Okay, sure. Eat kosher. What's the issue? I never ate shrimp in my life, anyways. I couldn't eat pork because I would get sick. So it wasn't a big deal, a big change for me in regards to eating kosher. Keeping Sabbath. Okay, well, we don't. I necessarily kept Sabbath, but we were the type of church that you would go out. I don't know if you heard the term soul winning. Knocking doors. We're independent Baptists, so we did that on Saturdays, anyways. It wasn't a big deal. Um, what I did not expect, I will say this, was the backlash from because within our movement, the independent Baptist movement, our family was very well known in the Spanish world. You could just imagine you got four pastors in one family. So it was very well known. But I didn't know the backlash where they would call you Judaizer, this or that, and yell out, well, you can't be saved with, all my videos are out there, all my teachings are out there. I've never one time said that or you're saved through keeping Torah. So we got a lot of backlash. And then the biggest thing, I should add this, the biggest thing that sometimes can hurt is you'll talk to a lot of pastor friends and they'll get it. Oh, wow, yeah, it makes sense. It makes sense. Wow, thank you, brother Isaac. Appreciate it. There's one guy, he was well known. I mean, his church runs about 2,000 people. And very well known, very charismatic, and people love him. They invite him for all the conferences, the teen conferences, the couples conferences. I mean, he is very, very well versed. So we went to Denny's and we spoke those two visits, two times, 4 hours. And he looked at me, he goes, Isaac, he goes, you've made me understand scriptures more than I have all my life. And again, he was a 54-year-old man that was raised just like me, one wife, Baptist all his life, no parties, nothing, just. And he goes, you made me understand scripture. So he goes back and he teaches on Shabbat in his 2,000 people's, church. But I don't think he knew the implications. So when he taught on Shabbat, he wasn't saying that not to come on church Sunday. He goes, hey, wouldn't it be nice to have a Shabbat on Saturday and they come with a lot of strength on Sunday to church? That was the type of message he was teaching. That was the last time he ever used the word Shabbat. That was the last time. And that was the last time he spoke to me. I think he didn't realize the cost. So when you speak to all these pastors, what got me was I thought these were men of valor. I thought these were men, you see them preach behind the pulpit. These guys are not going to bend. Once they know the truth, they're going to teach it. But man, look, I've spoken to so many different pastors that I thought they got it. For them just to go away off into the shadow, never to talk to me, and continue into error and their error. That opened my eyes to show that, you know what? A lot of pastors, they don't have backbone. They don't have the backbone that they portray to show. I think that's what caught me off guard. So even really good friends that we studied together, I paid their trip. Well, I didn't tell you this, but I spent over $35,000 taking pastors and missionaries to Israel because my church was so quiet. I had no idea if they believed me or not. I said, well, if I can get some Baptist preachers to believe this, it'll help me out a little bit with the church. So, out of the ones we've taken, 50% of them came to Torah. So I feel like it was a good investment. And then they're quiet about it because they're still part of the system, but they do believe it and they sort of teach it. But I think that's the biggest thing that surprised me was the fact that you would think that these men of God, these preachers, would have had the backbone to stand for truth, but wasn't the case.
So the one guy who had the big church, he got so much heat that he never talked about it again.
I assumed that for a couple of years till one of his friends finally told me, he goes, yeah, he goes from the big church, which is, you may know about First Baptist of Hammond, Indiana, very large church. They're like 25,000, 30,000 people. That's like the mother church of our type of churches. So I guess he got flack from that church. And he never said anything about it again.
Well, that's the hard part. I think that we're all kind of responsible for the things that we know. And when we're actually convinced of them and when we think, oh, this is kind of what the word means, then you gotta fear at that point, man.
That's true. I mean, there's sometimes it's a process. It may take a year, 2 years, 3 years for people to get it. But once you get it, you're not responsible.
Well, then good. This should be a call to all people and pastors. If you know this stuff, don't just blow it off. Look into it because, I mean, Yah has been faithful with you, hasn't he? I mean, have you been lacking since you came into this? Did your whole world fall apart after you made the jump?
By no means. By no means. I mean, well, I told you about my brother. They gave him a building. And when I started to walk, I get a house. I'm not looking for it. And again, I can be kicked out tomorrow, but I've enjoyed at least for 8 years, right? He's provided. Even I have a remote job, so I'm also a pastor here but I also had a remote job, work for a payment processing app, and it's allowed me to, even when I go on trips to Europe or Israel, I can take my computer, I can work from there. It was something I never looked for, but the Lord blessed me with even with that job, and with health, my kids, my family. I'll lose it all. I just don't want to lose my family. That's for me the most important thing. My kids and my wife.
Well, praise God. He is faithful. I hope people, especially pastors, will take courage from hearing your story, man.
Amen, brother.
Well, thank you for your time, Isaac. Thanks for being on the show. I appreciate it.
No problem. Thank you, Luke. I appreciate you all. Take care. Shalom.
Shalom. We have a company called Align the Stars Media, and we make media, such as documentaries and books, that does the same thing that our podcast does. It inspires Torah-observant believers. And so the first thing we ever made was the Way documentary, which tells the story of people who realized that the Torah is relevant for their modern day lives, and that it was such a life-altering realization that they changed their lives. Their friends and their family sometimes disowned them. They were kicked out of churches just because they wanted to live the way that they saw Jesus living in the Bible. And so that's what that documentary is about. And this podcast is sponsored by that documentary. And it is also sponsored by the book, The Truth Reformation 2.0, which I wrote, which kind of maps out the series of contradictions that are created. It's many of them. There's dozens of contradictions that are created by mainstream church doctrine when it claims that the law is not relevant to our modern day lives. So that's what that's about. It walks through every single contradiction or argument that someone might bring up to you and say, you're being Jewish, or you're Judaizing, or you're a Pharisee because you want to do the things that Jesus did and live the way that he lived. So that's what that book is all about. And it walks through Galatians and Hebrews and the Gospels and the rest of the Bible as well. I think we answer 95+% of the questions. It was every question that I could think of at the time. And then it's also sponsored by The Christmas Question, which is another documentary, dives deep into history. And it's about the history of Christmas. And the question is it a sin for Christians to celebrate Christmas? So that's what that's about. And there's one last thing that we made. Last year we made these tracts. These are illustrated pamphlets. And they go through the 5 main lifestyle differences between mainstream Christians and Torah-observant Christians. And so the first one is called Susie's Revenge, and it's all about the Sabbath day, how Torah observers keep the Sabbath day. And this is, it's awesome. This is one of my favorite ones. This little girl is going to a Catholic boarding school, and she gets a chance to ask hard questions to the headmistress about the Sabbath day. The next one is called Merry Christmas, and it is depicting why Torah-observant people keep the feast days and no longer celebrate the pagan-inspired festivals that are masquerading as Bible holidays like Christmas and Easter. The next one is Peteroni. This is all about Acts 10, Peter's vision, and because it's trying to flesh out why Torah observers believe that the Leviticus 11 food laws are for them today. And it goes in detail through Peter's vision to show how that was not Yah saying, Peter, now that I decided you can eat unclean meats. It was him welcoming Gentiles into the Commonwealth of Israel, which leads us to the next one. It is Winnie the Pooh Tracks Dispensations, which is all about Winnie the Pooh meeting up with John Nelson Darby, the creator of dispensationalism, and him asking silly little questions of Darby to show how dispensationalism is a heresy and how if you're saved, if you're a saved believer, you're welcomed into the commonwealth of the house of Israel. So that's what that's about. And finally, we have sovereign morality, which is all about tassels, like why we're wearing tassels, but it goes beyond just tassels, and it explores the fact that all the rest of the denominations in mainstream Christendom have slightly different moral codes because they don't agree with each other on every single piece of doctrine, and how Yah wrote a sovereign moral code for us, and that's the one that we're supposed to follow. And so that's all the stuff that we have produced to date. And if you buy any of this stuff, you're supporting us making this podcast so we can keep jaunting around the country and interviewing people and hopefully inspiring you guys. So go to thewaydoc.com and get any of that